And we wanted to thank James Monroe with Oregon Pacific Financial Advisors. I'm Ryan Mallory.
And I'm Jared Banry.
Welcome to the show. Today we're talking with Sarah Leonard. She's come to visit from Emergency Communications Southern Oregon, ECSO. Sarah, what do you do there?
Thanks for having me. I'm the training supervisor there at ECSO. Okay. So I work out in the dispatch floor every now and then I do logistics and management type stuff most of the time.
Okay, so you know everything about the whole operation.
Everything but what I don't know.
Ah, right.
Yes, I like that.
That makes it easy. Well, we've always thought of 911 with Scanner Group and things like that because it started out just a bunch of people listening to the scanner and reporting on what they heard, and then people started giving us more tips about what was going on that wasn't coming over the scanner. So we get to hear a lot of voices. We get to hear the automated 911 response calls and those kind of things. And you guys are kind of unsung heroes to us. We get to hear a lot of the dispatchers' voices. We get to hear a lot of the calls that you guys put through. And some of those are just sometimes cringeworthy, sometimes pretty emotional, even on the listening end. You guys cover a lot of stuff, so we appreciate you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So how long have you been doing this?
I have been doing it for 16 years.
No kidding. You don't look old enough to
Thank
do
you.
that for 16 years.
She started when she was 12.
I
Yes,
did.
yes.
I was 10.
Protege.
Yeah.
So you train new people coming in, I would imagine?
I do, yes.
And you teach them to use all of the equipment and all of the standards and protocol, those kind of things?
Most of it. Well, actually not most of it. The training process is interesting because it can take anywhere from 6 to 10 months, even longer than that, depending on, the individual and their individual progress. But for the most part, when they first come in, they're with me for a couple weeks, and then we go over the computer system, and it really is like learning a new language because we have computer codes that we use, and that's how we communicate. So my intent at that point is really to get them to learn the new language. And, because if you don't know language, you can't communicate. And then send them out to the floor with the dispatcher or a coach that they're with. And then from there, they'll take it and they'll show them how to do the call taking and fire dispatching and law dispatching.
They do some peer training after the initial training where they sit by somebody and take calls together so they get real world practice with somebody there to help them when it gets sideways or anything like that? They
do, yeah. So when a dispatcher's in training, they're with a training officer. We call them coaches or CTOs, certified training officers. So they're with that person the entire time. They're never not with their CTO.
Oh.
So, and initially in the beginning phases, they're sitting at the same desk with them. And then as it progresses and they get to the point where they're signed off on call taking, which is usually our most intricate phase of our training because you have to learn a lot and know a lot with call taking. So once they get signed off on that, then they can sit at different positions, but they're still being monitored and coached by their trainer.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Trainers.
I managed a phone company and internet service provider and we had a phone floor and people that had to learn different codes and things like that. Maybe not as complicated as what you're doing, but they had to know how to help everybody with every computer, that kind of stuff. When they called in, my internet's not working, or I can't get the game on my phone. Pretty important to people, but not as important as what you do. To me, the equipment is really interesting. So I do web development and that kind of stuff. And I have screens in front of me, but you guys have quite a bit of equipment in front of you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We do. And that's funny. I just came across a picture the other day from 2007 taken at the old building that I worked at in 2007. And there were 5 computer screens in front of us. And at that time, it was a lot. Today we have 9.
9 screens.
9 screens.
Is that a panel, like a panel of 9, three rows and columns?
It's not. Those are what we mainly work on with the computer system and dispatching police and fire. And so it's 9 screens. And it was kind of interesting to see that because I thought our profession has changed even locally so much in such a short period of time. Because with each screen has come new technology. More to learn. With text to 911, that was another thing to learn. How do you handle it? How do you process a text call?
Oh, yeah.
So it's been...
So on those screens, what kind of things are on them? You can track the police cars, I would imagine?
Yeah, we have a map system that tracks the police and fire units that have the mobile data computers in the cars, if they have GPS set up. Which is helpful when we're talking to callers, and especially on medical, we use it a lot where one of the things we hear a lot is, just get them here now. And we'd love to.
They're in a panic, and you have to calm them down to get enough information so that everybody can help them.
We do, yeah. And, on the medical calls, we ask a lot of questions, and we try to explain why. And the reason we're asking those is for the medics. They need to know exactly what they're going into. And based on the answers to those questions, it can change it from an emergent response to just a routine response, or it could maybe let them know that they need to prepare with different equipment, things like that. Right. So that's the reason for the questions. And as the responders are going, we're able to look at that on the map if they have the computer in their apparatus with the GPS on it. And then we can reassure the caller, we never want to say they're going to be there in 2 minutes, because if something happens and they're not there in 2 minutes, but we could at least say they're always coming as quickly and safely as they can.
Yeah, they're getting closer to you, at least, is a good thing to hear, I'm sure.
It is, yeah.
So when officers set up a perimeter, you're able to see where the cars are parked on the perimeter-wise and direct them to, you got a hole here or a hole here?
Sometimes we can. It depends on if the officer parked their vehicle somewhere and then they just walked somewhere else. We're not able to see if they're their person. We're not able to see their body.
The humans
move.
aren't tracked with GPS.
They're not.
Like
They're not chipped?
No.
It's coming.
Maybe I'll retire by then. I don't know. 16 years sounds good.
It'll be part of the body cam someday. It's already possible. Yeah.
So we're not able to see that, but we are with perimeters. We can tell them if there's a vehicle that's, I guess it kind of depends on the type of incident too, but if there is an opening, we could look at that as long as it had the GPS in it.
When people make those calls, I mean, sometimes that's themselves or a relative that's having a dire emergency, whether that be an injury or some kind of health problem, and they're probably not psychologically in the frame of mind to even know where they live sometimes. I know when people get, my field of education is psychology, when people are very flustered, the most common things are really hard for them to remember. So you guys do quite a bit of training relative to managing people's emotions so that you can get what you need to help them? We
do. Yes, that's one of the biggest things that we go over because we all understand, everybody's been scared, everybody's been upset. We can empathize with our callers. We're not going through their exact situation, but we've been probably through something similar. So we certainly try to empathize with them and work with them. And sometimes it is a matter of, we do have to say, hey, take a deep breath, and kind of regroup or reassure them, we've got help on the way, these questions, help the officers while they're on the way, that kind of thing. Because they don't know what's happening. So it's important for us to say, I'm starting law enforcement, or I'm starting, the ambulance, or whoever we're starting for them, so they know, okay, I know that I have some help coming. Yeah. And then explain, this is why I have these questions for you. And we're always trying to be efficient with our time and their time, because everybody's time at that point is valuable, and get the most efficient process done, and then the best information out to our responders, always with a focus on scene safety and responder safety.
I've had to call 911 a few times in my life for other people, for an accident or for a health problem, and I happen to be around, and it's pretty comforting to hear a calm voice on the phone that doesn't escalate with yours. I'm a pretty calm guy, but those kind of situations are a little bit frantic, and each time I could tell that the 911 operator's voice stayed at a level that kept me at a calm level so that I could function and do what I needed to do on the phone.
Yeah, we do try to keep calm on the phone and the radios too. If on law enforcement more sometimes so than fire, because law enforcement is so dynamic and can change so quickly. But we do try to keep the calm, cool voice so they know, like, we've got you,
Yeah.
We're there for you. We got it.
Yeah. And I sometimes imagine those calls are even hard to take. Yeah. Some horrible things. I mean, we can all hit YouTube and listen to some pretty horrible calls. And I can't imagine having to take people's last point of misery type of calls as part of my career. But you guys handle it and decompress somehow when you get home, I would imagine.
Yeah, everybody's different. Some people, we're lucky locally here, because in our 911 center in Jackson County, we have a really well-developed wellness program. And with that, we have a counselor and we have chaplains and things like that. So we always have the opportunity to reach out for help if we need it. And there's a big focus on that, because we need to be well for us to do our job.
Yeah, definitely. And the last thing we want to do as citizens that pay for this stuff and need the use of it is hurt somebody else's life because they had that job. So that makes me feel proud that you say that you guys have enough people to talk to and things like that.
We do, and we have a strong peer support group, and the partners within the room. It's interesting because you can just tell, the energy in the room changes when something happens, and sometimes that can be a really tough call with a child, or like with the fires. I mean,
I can't imagine
Fires.
That was quite an experience.
I had the scanner on from early in the morning because of the winds. I wanted to watch the winds. There's always arcing wires and interesting stuff for us to report. Yeah. And as it went on through the day, some of those calls were just heartbreaking.
Yeah, that one was definitely a challenge. And so I went to work that day, and that was one of those days I thought, oh, I'm going to get so much stuff done, sit down in my office with my coffee. Oh, no. Oh,
Didn't
no.
get to finish the coffee.
No, the coffee went to waste. But
all calls all of the time that day, I bet.
It was. So we have in our dispatch center, we have the 911 screen, and it will display all the calls in queue and pending and things. And when we have a 911 in queue, it will sound an alarm. That alarm went nonstop 15 hours.
Oh, man.
Gosh.
And it was just, you just do the best you can, and we had people come in on their day off. We had people working on their wedding anniversary,
wow.
and they just, that's just what they do.
If you're out there and you worked on your wedding anniversary, thank you.
We had 3 that did.
No,
I know. And who
that's
knew
cool.
that they'd all gotten married that day? But so yeah, and I was so proud of all of those people. I worked with them for 6 days straight because at that point in dispatch, it was like a rotating 12s kind of a thing, or 15. I worked 15 hours that first day, and we had one supervisor come in on her wedding anniversary, and she, I think, worked 14 hours. And, she'd had plans with her husband, and nothing to it. She just came in, worked 14 hours. We set up the backup center. She started taking calls out there, and then just the dispatchers, we ended up ordering pizza for them because you got to eat,
Right.
and you have to drink. So
you have to have substance to keep doing it.
yeah. So the admin staff, the support staff, we were delivering them pizza to their desks and water, and can we get you anything? And between calls, they'd say, no, thanks, no. And just call after call after call. And I'm so honored to work with all those people. They are just amazing. And then our partners on the radio, and very honored to work with them.
Yeah, we have a sound and video intro to this podcast that we built that has some scanner calls, and I took some select scanner calls that we reported on over the years. One of them was an officer-involved shooting in Central Point, and I'm just taking the dispatchers' voices and mixing them up with some kind of rap beats. And one of those is a dispatcher, and she says, and she's talking about Phoenix on Main Street, and she says, structure fully engulfed, and she gives the address on Main Street, and then you hear her say, and the one next to it.
Oh, yeah.
And I hardly ever hear emotion coming through dispatcher's voice. That was late in the day. That was about the time everybody had to feel pretty broken. We've had Chuck Glose, who's a Medford firefighter and paramedic, on here that was part of that day. And, he was saying they just felt defeated. They usually get to win. They put the structure out, nothing else burns, and couldn't get ahead of it no matter how many people showed up.
Yes.
I imagine the same thing on dispatch. The calls come and you don't have anywhere to send them at that point, yeah?
Oh, it was difficult. There in the early stages, we had a couple calls where they were stuck in Ashland, I think, and they didn't know how to get out. And we had officers in the area trying to evacuate, and we were sending fire resources that way. But, you have someone on the phone that says, what do? I don't know. And for us to try to break through the Ashland police radio to say, we've got this resident at this address, where do they go? Because we didn't know,
right.
And we had to relay that. And that was one that it's so loud and chaotic in the center anyway. I had to take that one from the person who took the call and walk it over to the dispatcher, which we don't do that. We do everything by computer. So
right.
I had to go over to them and then say, hey, I need you to break into the radio and ask this question. Luckily, we were able to get everybody, we were able to coordinate that part of it, which was great.
The loss of life was so low in such a large fire. Amazing. And my hometown, I've lived here for 28 years, but my hometown of Weed burnt. Yes. I knew lots of people that were in the Chico Paradise area and Redding, and it didn't go as well in those places. I feel like we couldn't put it out, but there wasn't much loss of life.
No, I was so impressed by everybody. And then, in the center there, it's just like all hands on deck at that point. And you're hearing from people on the radio that you never hear from. All the detectives came out, and all of those police officers that were clearing the mobile home parks in Phoenix and Talent and all of that, while the firefighters were actively working to put out the fire. It was just...
Yeah, we heard them
so amazing.
Yelling, busting open trailers,
Yes.
An OHP officer that was putting some folks from a retirement home out in the middle of a green field because that was the closest place that was safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I know, it was amazing.
really hard to listen to. I can't imagine how hard it is to maintain your workflow and your professionalism and things like that when you hear that for 14 hours.
Yeah, that one was interesting. All of them, we had some people who we called back in to work that had to leave because the fire was getting to their house and they had to evacuate.
Yeah.
And it's just, they're just amazing people. So
Yeah.
amazing. And actually, I pulled stats from that day.
Oh, cool.
So our daily average is 1,100 to 1,300 calls processed. And on that day, we had 6,728 calls just on that day. So, and that's with about 2,000 of them going out to the back of the center.
5-6 times the number of calls.
Yeah. So it was a lot.
And I know just from the phone floor at the phone company, we take always less than 1,000 calls with at least a half dozen people on the floor, probably more, and more than one shift accounted for that call. And if there's a problem, if something's out, yeah, we take a lot more calls, but it's never 5 or 6 times as many calls.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a different day.
You guys, with the counseling and stuff like that, get help with PTSD from an event like that? I imagine that's got to affect somebody. Maybe not everybody. Maybe you guys are used to those kind of things, but I'm sure that's got to affect somebody.
It might. I'm not sure.
It's all kind of private HIPAA stuff anyway. Right?
Yeah, it is. It's their option to do it. We always like to have it there. And I think, I can't even remember, but I think that day we had a chaplain or a counselor, and sometimes they'll just come in and just walk around.
Yeah.
And that's enough to just look up and see, oh, there's a chaplain here. And it's just comforting to some people.
People care.
They do, yeah.
You feel it even if you don't want it right then.
Yeah, and our chaplains and counselors are great because something like that happens, and they're usually first thing, hey, how's dispatch doing? And do you want us to come down there and do a walk around? And it's nice that they consider that, because it really is where it all starts. And that, our job as the 911 dispatcher and the call taker is to take that caller's information and then try to figure out, how do I package this up for my responders? What is going on? And so it is a lot of effort, put in by the call taker to try to diagnose it and then classify it and send it out.
It goes lots of places. It gets read by an automated system over the radio that tells us a motor vehicle collision at such and such a place. I know also we can look at Pulse Point, a phone app that pulls it in from all over the nation, and we can go to a specific fire district or and see the calls that have come through, or if one came through recently, really, because a lot of the dispatch stuff is so fast. I don't catch it all, and then I go look at Pulse Point to see what it really was.
Yes.
Or back up. If I wait a half an hour, I can back up in the archive and listen to it again. How much goes into putting a call out? So let me explain myself. A call comes in, somebody's got some kind of problem, and you may need to send multiple services, probably mostly police and EMTs or fire department, that kind of stuff. Does it come out to everybody at the same time when you place a call and you order something up? Does it go out to everybody from that equipment, or are there multiple points of contact you have to make?
Oh, that's a good question. When it comes in as the call taker, we go off a priority system. And again, this is just for Jackson County, because I know you have a lot of viewers from other places. But for Jackson County, we go off of a priority system. So based on the caller's report, if it's medical, fire, or police, we'll take the information in and then we'll classify it as something. So if somebody calls and says, my boyfriend and I are fighting and he just hit me, that's a domestic. And that's always a priority 1 call. So that's a high priority call, 2 officers that are going to go to it right away. And then, if we have, he hit me and he broke my arm, then that involves medical and fire here in Jackson County, our first responders, that's what they're called. So then we would do the medical component, and that's where we would ask the questions about the injury to see what kind of injury are we looking at and how would they treat it, for any kind of reason. But then you also have a scene safety aspect because he hit her. So now, we're concerned about what his location is on scene. And then you always have to ask about weapons and if there's intoxicants involved and things like that. But once we get that call and we enter it, everybody can see it at the same time in dispatch.
Okay.
And then for the police agency, everybody that has a computer in their car could look at it and see it as well. So everyone in dispatch can see it, so we're at least aware of it. And then for the fire part of it, that would involve the fire dispatcher to dispatch it and then manage those units. The law dispatcher would manage the police response for that. And then the call taker would be sometimes a separate one. Sometimes the call taker is the fire dispatcher or the law dispatcher, it depends. So they can do everything. They can dispatch and take calls, so it kind of depends.
With the fire, we hear 3 alarm, 5 alarm. Is that the number of units that they're sending out, or battalions? And I hear them call lots of battalion numbers.
Yes.
And each one of those numbers is a different truck they're sending out, or a different station?
It's currently, you'll hear like Battalion 2, Battalion 3. Yeah. So Battalion 2 is the Medford Fire Department Battalion Chief.
Okay.
And then the Battalion 3 is Fire District 3, their Battalion Chief. And Battalion 1 would be Ashland Fire and Rescue. So that's what that is. And sometimes on a structure fire in the city of Medford, or if it's kind of on the border with Medford and Jackson County Fire District 3's jurisdiction, they'll send 2 battalion chiefs, or they'll dispatch 2. Okay. So that's why you'll hear that. And then along with usually 5 engines too.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Response.
That makes sense. Mm-hmm. And with something like the example you gave of a domestic call, we often hear like a 911 call go across with the automated voice, and then we hear a dispatcher get on, and they're giving information to the police over the radio. Those more details, those are something that you guys often put in that they're saying, is that?
It is. And for the fire agency, that's where we have that automated voice, and that's just a system that we have in place. We used to do that years ago before we had that system. The dispatcher would get on and give that dispatch out. So for the dispatcher's part of it, it's a bit of a time saver. It's something that our fire agencies push to have done. And then because it does other things for the fire agencies with lighting and how it sends out their tones and how it wakes them up and things like that. So there's a lot of logic behind it. But for us, it's just a fact of us. We dispatch the call, and then it will, as it's announcing it, we can still be talking to the caller on the phone. And before, we'd have to say, hold on a second while I dispatch this out. And then we'd go on the radio and give the dispatch and then come back. So it's kind of nice that we have that time now with the caller where we can still ask them questions or process the call.
Is the tones different for like a medical tone or a fire tone when it comes across the radio, or is it the same tone?
It's the same tone. It's different based on the station or the agency.
Okay.
They have their own tones.
I can hear it in my head right now. I'll have to collect that up for post-production of this and actually just play the tone.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, if you're handling a domestic, woman calls in, says, my husband hit me. Husband calls in saying, my wife's got me locked out. Woman saying she's hurt. You got to get medical. You got to get it. Is it one dispatcher talking to both?
It would be probably 2 different call takers at that point, one police dispatcher and then the fire dispatcher for our agency that would be.
I was going to say, that's a little much for one person.
Yeah. Possibly in some of those cases save a life or save a major injury, and definitely you guys have to collect enough information to keep the first responders safe that are going into that situation.
Yes, we do. Yeah, that's always our top priority is the responder safety.
You get to talk to the first responders a lot when you're in that kind of job?
On the radio and on the phone, we talk to them all the time. We've been locked down since COVID, so we haven't seen any of our responders in person, but every now and then they would come in and do walkthroughs or, some kind of thing, which is nice, but we don't see them too often anymore.
Nice to put the faces together with the voices, I would imagine.
It is, yeah.
You guys get to talk to the cops over the radio sometimes, I would imagine, for part of that?
We do, all the time.
Yeah, all the time. It's just part of it. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Okay. I mean, we don't, ask like what they want for lunch or anything at that point, but
right.
Professional.
Well, one thing that I've noticed, having been a police officer and worked with dispatch, and I was listening to I was bored that night. The Eagle Point had their most recent shooting, And I was really impressed with the calmness of the dispatcher when the officer said that the one officer had been shot. And when you're in your patrol car and you hear an officer down, your adrenaline's going and you're racing as fast as you can. When you have a situation where it's a high priority incident, tragic, do you guys debrief afterwards in regards to we should have done this, we could do this better? I mean, do you guys look at each one of those situations and analyze it? Or I know you're so busy because the next one's coming right up on and you may not have time, but I've always wondered, I mean, do you guys have to kind of debrief? Because I know law enforcement does.
Yeah.
We go back into the station and we talk and, try to debrief a little bit. I mean, do you guys get that luxury?
That's a really good question. I'm glad you brought it up. That's something that we've talked about a few times because there is a difference between dispatch and our field partners in that when a field partner is on a call, they're dedicated to that call. That's their job. And they have a lot of different things they do on that call, but that's what they're doing. Whereas in dispatch, we've taken the call, we've processed the call, we've dispatched the call, next call.
Yep.
So the next call could be a CPR. Next call could be a cold theft. Next call could be someone slashed my tires. But it just keeps going. And we have to keep the people in the seats to handle the radios and the phones. So it's not like we could say, we're not answering phone calls for 20 minutes while we talk about this. Even though it would be helpful in some cases to be able to do that decompression and that debrief part. So what we've done instead is that's where we kind of check in on each other and we'll say, do you need a minute, or do you need to get up or whatever. And most of our people, they get up and maybe they need to call home for 5 minutes, or maybe they just need to go play a game on their phone, or maybe whatever they need to do.
Stretch and get a breather.
Yeah. But for the most part, they're just like, no, I'm fine.
It's just to shake it off and on to the next one because that's what they do, right?
I just got to get the next call. And then usually at the end of the shift, or however the individual handles it, but they usually stay in there until the end, and then they'll do their decompression or whatever it is that they need to do.
Yeah.
Wow. I think as a citizen, they don't understand that. Yeah. Citizens don't understand what dispatchers go through.
The stress of taking 1,100 to 1,300 calls. How many people take that many calls in a day? How many staff members actually are taking calls to take that many calls?
It varies based on the hours of the day. Our highest staffing is 10, and that's minimum staffing. So sometimes we have more, but is 10, and that's at about 5 p.m. And even at that point, we've got 2 that are not dedicated to phones because they're doing the sheriff's office radio and Medford PD radio. Uh-huh. So they don't answer phones unless, we have an Alameda fire type day, and then they're answering the phones and the fire dispatchers aren't because, they're busier at that point. So we have about 8 people that are doing the phones at that point. But in the early morning hours, we go down to 5 people, and we still have the 2 that are dedicated to the radios not answering phones. So we'll have about 3 people taking calls.
When you say dedicated to the radios, they're talking back and forth with law enforcement? Is that?
They are, and we like to keep the primary law enforcement dispatchers off of the phones because it is dynamic. You could have an officer come up and say, I just got shot, or you could have them come up and say, I'm in pursuit of a vehicle, or, that kind of thing. So we want them to be focused on that radio so they can start
Makes sense.
handling that traffic if it comes through. And then it is a balance of weighing emergencies, and it could be on the police radio, a lot of times anything on that could be an emergency. Not so much on fire, even though sometimes, if they have they have to abandon a structure or something, that's an emergency. But at that point, you usually have them dedicated to an incident, so I got to watch out for them on this.
Pretty good radio systems here, and I think cops and dispatchers probably take it for granted because they get good at listening to the radio and hearing what's going on, but there's a lot going on sometimes when we like to listen to it often on a phone app or a handheld analog scanner, but on the phone app it's multiple departments all slammed together, and there's enough things going on that it's hard for the average person that doesn't do those things to make a lot of sense on it. I have to listen to it really clear, make notes, even back up and listen to some things again, and there's a delay, so I can listen to a real scanner and then hear it again on the radio, and sometimes that's really helpful. I'm just amazed at all of the codes and things that people can pick up from the radio, and it makes sense that those people are separated from the calls.
Yes, yeah. And that too plays into the learning that language before you get out there and learning all the codes and, even saying vehicle instead of car or, in custody. What does that mean? You have to learn all these different terms and how they're relevant. And, and sometimes on the radios we can't quite understand it, but because we know, well, that's what he said, and
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
you can fill in the blank based on the pieces that you've heard. Probably.
Yeah, the scenario and what it is and what's happening. So, yeah.
So now the interesting open-ended questions. What do you think is the most rewarding part of your job on the spot?
On the spot. Oh boy. And
there is no wrong answer.
That's good. For me personally, I would say the experience working with the public safety community, and that's everybody at my agency, all the people in the field, our police and fire users, our medics, and then our records divisions. We work super closely with them, when we confirm warrants and restraining orders and things like that. And the jail, we work with them. So it's just being in the whole public safety arena is the most beneficial thing for me. And I've done it for 16 years, so I guess I'm okay at it. But I feel like I'm supposed to be here for now, and so that feels good.
Yeah, you definitely get the feeling that everybody is turbo looking out for the public, and in the day of complaints about everything, anybody can complain about anything. I hear it. I hear the care in people's voices, and cops' voices, and fire department voices, and definitely dispatch. You guys are in it for the win, and man, we appreciate that.
Oh yeah.
Well, and coming from a law enforcement background, you don't know how grateful we are for good dispatchers. I mean, just the calmness in the voice. I can think back on my career and being in some situations thinking, how did I get myself into this mess? And then that nice soft little voice comes over the radio and giving me the information that I need to make a calculated decision to go home.
Yeah.
And words cannot express.
Your eyes. It's before you even get to a call, they were your eyes.
Yeah.
Whatever you're going to know about the call before you get there, it came from one of them.
Yep.
Yeah.
You've kept a lot of officers going home to their families night after night after night because of your guys' expertise. And so from me and from the law enforcement community, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. One last question.
Yes.
We always like to know from first responders, and we consider dispatch first responders. You're actually the very first responder, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the very first responder. What can the public do better to make your guys' jobs better? What can they do better? Like if we're calling in, obviously keep our cool and give as much information as possible. But what kind of things should the public know when they call dispatch, when they call 911?
Where you are. That is the biggest thing. Your address or what road you're on, what cross street you're near. That's the biggest thing. Our first question when you call 911 is, what's the address for your emergency? And we have different, technologies to try to see where you are, but we can't rely on that. It's technology.
Less accurate and a little bit slower, right?
Yeah. So, and we always will try, but we want to make sure we get help to the right place. And that's even... It doesn't do us any good if we have someone on the phone saying, get them here now, but they haven't told us where you are. Because at least if you tell us where you are, we're going to send everybody. Yeah. Because we don't know what's going on, but we know where to send them. And then, we'll convey to the responders that the person's just saying, get here now, we're hearing screaming, whatever it is that we're hearing. So that's the biggest thing.
You get some pretty layman directions about where they are, like I'm about a block away from the stop and go, what stop and go, that kind of stuff.
Sometimes, but even that is helpful. Business names, even...
Because you guys live here. I mean, you're in the same grocery stores we are.
Right? Yes.
You get to shop with superheroes.
Yeah, that's helpful. Business, landmarks, all of that stuff, that can help us pinpoint where the person is. So that's the biggest thing. And then, I would say the other thing is, we understand that people are upset. They have a range of emotions. Some people are super calm, cool, and collected. And it's just however the individual handles the incident, and we get that. And we're going to try to work with the person. And we have scripted questions, and not necessarily like we're reading from a book, but
right.
We have a schedule of things to ask. Yeah. So we know what we need to ask you. And sometimes people are, so excited and they want to give us all kinds of information right away. And sometimes we'll redirect them and say, okay, hold on just a second. I need to ask you this first.
Yeah, the order makes a difference.
It does. It does. So basically kind of follow along with how the dispatcher prompts you. is
If you're in need for help and you called somebody for help, best to let them be your guide to how that help's delivered by answering their questions in the order that they come, staying as calm as possible and being as complete and clear with the information as possible, because folks like Sarah are going to have to type this stuff in so a bunch of other people see it, and you're going to get the best help if you do that.
Yeah, it really does help with the efficiency of the call. If they're going to guide you through it.
Yeah.
And it is in a specific order for a reason. You know, for the police calls, if you have a suspect involved, you want to get that suspect information so you can tell the officer while they're on the way. Maybe they see the suspect while they're driving there. You know, so that's why maybe we'll ask that before we say, how much was that bike that they stole? You know, because at that point, that doesn't matter as much. We want to know who did it. You know, we'll get it, but it's going to be about 20 seconds later. So that kind of thing. And then the medical understanding that, you know, we're operating on, it's an internationally recognized and used standard, our medical calls.
Okay.
And that's where all the questions come from. They were created by medical doctors and lawyers. And so that's what we use for our medical process. And that's how we give our CPR instructions and any kind of instruction that we have for patient care.
Have you had to give CPR instructions a lot of times over
Many
in
times.
your career? Yeah.
Many times. And what's cool is dispatchers don't often have the end of the story. So with our CPR, especially now, there's a big focus on hands on chest quickly. Mm-hmm. So we're really focusing on that.
The breaths are less important now than they were the first time I took a CPR class, I think.
Yes, yeah. So we're really trying to get to recognize that this is a cardiac arrest and we need to get hands on chest. And what's neat is to hear that the patient walked out of the hospital a few days later. Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And so when we do hear that, which is not often, and you know, for whatever reason, it's not often we hear that, but the dispatcher gets a lifesaver pin. So that's pretty cool.
We don't get to hear the rest of the story often when we're like reporting on a call, and we're just reporting on what you guys in law enforcement do, but maybe more than you, because people come back and say what happened.
Yeah.
The members at large in our groups come back and tell us, oh, that was my uncle and he's doing okay. Or it's nice. It's definitely nice to hear the end of the story, especially if it turned out well.
Yes. Yeah, it is nice to hear that.
I guess I do have one more question. If somebody wants to get involved in attempting to become a dispatcher or a 911 operator, what kind of stuff should they study, and what's the path there? What do they do?
That's a really good question too. You know, if it's local, I would suggest listen to the scanner. You pick up the jargon, you learn how the cadence and how things are done. That is hugely beneficial if you want to get into it. And then life experience is really great, but it kind of depends on what, you know, I mean, we have some people who are, you know, early 20s and they're just rock stars and they have a different life experience, but it's relevant, you know, to their job. So all of that plays into it. Typing is the biggest thing, to be a fast typer.
Fast typer, and I would imagine some of those younger folks are probably pretty good at managing all of the technology because they were born with it.
They are good with it.
Jared is off camera right now making hunt and peck noises with his fingers on the table because he's always told me that's how he types.
Yeah,
I type pretty fast because I program and do some different things.
What's the
websites? But my mind does not work that fast. I have to go re-listen to the call. I'm not going to make folks calling 911 repeat it to me.
Okay, well, this is your interview, by the way. So.
Fired. Get out of here. Bring donuts.
What's the standard words per minute there? Is it like 25?
No, it's
a lot
I think
higher.
we had, at one point, I think we had 60. At one point, we had 45. But in reality,
150.
I actually qualify.
See?
I'm over 60.
We got great benefits.
60.
Great benefits. Yeah. So, but in reality, it's more from 70 to 100 plus is really good.
Yeah.
Keep up with that radio traffic and, you know, the phone calls and stuff. That's what we like.
Wow.
And
Excellent. So if you want to be a dispatcher or 911 operator, you better get on the Mavis Beacon typing program and learn to type really fast. And listen to dispatch, and feel free to walk around with a headset on and let your family hear you practicing dispatching calls.
There you go. See,
I have a question, though.
Yeah.
Before we end.
Yes.
Everybody watches YouTube. Everyone hears these outrageous, outlandish calls that come in about they didn't give me my cheeseburger or I got bit on the back of my neck by a deer. Do you guys really field those types of calls?
Wasted time calls.
Not a whole heck of a lot. We don't.
Not
But sometimes.
no prank calls.
I've had one. I've had two. One person wanted to know what time it was, and the other person thought they were calling Domino's.
Oh gosh.
Someone had the munchies.
Maybe, I don't know. That was a long time ago.
Too funny. Yeah, I would imagine making prank calls to 911 is or should be illegal. So we're not suggesting that.
No.
Please
It
don't
is
do that.
illegal.
But I imagine some of that stuff happens.
Misuse of
sometimes.
911.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
We see some of those charges come through in the
Yes.
mugshots.
You know, that's a good point, if I may.
please.
With the non-activate, or what's the term? I don't know what it is. But when you get a new cell phone and you keep your old one,
Yeah.
you know, because we always do that, and then we keep the box it came in because we're going to use it someday, right?
Right.
So if you keep that cell phone, a lot of people will give it to their kids or something to play with. It will call 911.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the kids don't often talk to us. So any call that's made to 911, we call it back, except for those.
Yeah. Don't let your child swat you.
Right. Or you could just take the battery out, or, you know, whatever it is you need to do. If the kid wants to play with it, that's fine. But it's still call 911.
I have a 1.5-year-old granddaughter, and we have a cell phone that we just let her play with because it still lights up.
Oh.
I just learned something that I'm going to go fix.
Yes. See?
Wow.
Yeah.
Lots of people bump the button by accident because it's on their lock screen. You
Yes.
can make emergency call when you don't mean to. I did it one time. I was incredibly apologetic. You guys were really nice about it.
And then with the Apple Watches, the fall detection, we do get that a lot too. You know, people skiing and they're like, I was just skiing, you know.
Oh
And
my! It calls if you fall.
Calls 911.
it does.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, there's all this technology coming out with fall detection, and you know, and that's
Doesn't
just,
really work. That would
without-
be good
yeah.
for my grandmother. She's in her 90s, but she could not operate the watch. So that seems
Yeah, without
not a
being
very
rude, that
useful,
sounds kind of stupid.
not a real
to me.
useful, not a real useful feature.
right. But we still do have to call those back. So that takes
You have to make sure there's not a problem, right?
Right. Yeah. So that takes the call being made to us. We answer it. We try to get someone on the line. Nobody talks to us. We call it back to make sure there's no emergency. So every one of those calls is.
I hear over the radio how hard you guys try on 911 hang-ups
Yeah.
because that could be something. And sometimes things are said like there was yelling in the background, and I see law enforcement and dispatch really focus in on those ones because yelling in the background, that signifies somebody might have been in some danger and just got a call out, and that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. We do have that sometimes. We do. And then, you know, there's the newsworthy cases where someone called and ordered a pizza. Yes, it really did happen. If you're not able to talk to us, at least at some point, we're going to ask questions. And then if you're not answering correctly, then that will clue us in, you know, to know, okay, there's something going on. They're not answering correctly. But we always prefer, what we try to do is yes or no answers instead of, you know, like I want extra pepperoni kind of a thing.
Right.
Well, we'll try to ask, you know, are you not free to talk or something like that to try to get that.
Yeah.
convey that.
Are you possibly in danger and can't tell me what's going on right now? That kind
Right.
of stuff. Huh?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, we deeply appreciate you coming on the show to talk to us a little bit more about it and educate the public about what goes on at Emergency Communications Services of Southern Oregon.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for tuning in to the Scanner Group Crowdsourced Crime and Safety Podcast with Ryan Mallory and Jared Banry from ThiefHunter Labs. Make sure to subscribe today for notifications about the next show. Visit us at www.thiefhunterlabs.com or on Facebook as Thief Hunter Labs in the search bar.